Okay, welcome to the Ohio Family Engagement Leadership Summit. We are glad that you could join us on this day of professional learning meant to take family, school, community partnership to the next level. My name is Hadley Bachman, and I will be this session's moderator. This session is session 17, Leading School Systems for Family Engagement. If you have any questions, concerns, I lost my script, or technical issues, please message me privately in the chat. To ensure all get the most out of today, we ask that all participants turn off their webcams and microphones. If you have questions for the presenter, please use the chat feature, and you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Please use the hashtag OHSummit23 to share your thoughts, and I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Boone now.
All right. Thank you, Hadley. I get to work with Hadley every day. Lucky me, here at the Statewide Family Engagement Center at Ohio State University. And I'm just so glad to be with all of you here today. And thank you for joining me to help you kind of follow along and maybe take some of these ideas back with you. The slides that I'm using, those are attached to this session on the webpage, as well as a note catcher. And that note catcher, it's optional. It's really just a place for you to jot down your thoughts that kind of follows along with how I'm going to go through this content with you and talk about leading for family engagement today. So feel free to grab that and use it. You'll notice on my slides there's going to be a little note image. I'll point it out to you when there's something in particular that I'm doing that has a connection to that note catcher. So it's really just a place to help you organize your thinking. So thank you so much for being here. I want you to really lean in with me to this idea of leading family engagement. So we've heard a lot of things. I mean, Debbie Pusher is I just admire her beyond measure. And a lot of things that she really speaks about are practices. She showed us things teachers and administrators are doing in schools. And she also was sharing with us mindsets, this moving from school-centric to family-centric. And that's a real shift in thinking. Those are all things we need to do, essential things we need to do, things that I am working at, our team here at Ohio State works at. At the same time, we need leaders to help all of us move this along. So I want to speak in this session to the leading aspect. I'm really going to focus in there to this idea of leading school systems for family engagement. All righty. So here's what I'm thinking about. I want to really focus this on 8 essential elements. You can see those. Dr. Joyce Epstein out of Johns Hopkins, who is a true mentor of mine and another person who I just admire immensely, really brings these 8 essential elements out. She and I have written about this together, and I'll share that with you so you can, if you want to know more. But I'm going to really center this conversation on that, and as well as I'd love for you to sort of lean in and say, here's 2 or 3 things I'm going to take away from this, things that I can put into action, right? So that's my hope, that this time will be worth your time and that you will be doing that today. So what I want to start with, though, is to share with you some information from a district survey. So we every year do a survey of over 300 districts in Ohio. We have many more. But we focus in on a set of districts in Ohio, and each year we send their leadership a survey, and we ask them some basic questions, all centered really around aspects of leadership for family engagement. So we had, so I want to share some the most recent year's data that we have with you, just to give you some ideas of sort of what we're looking at. So we had 150 districts respond to this. We had a 46% return rate, so that's about 55. So roughly half responded. So when you get data, you got to think about, well, who responded, who didn't. So this isn't like the absolute truth, but these are some things we learned from about 150 districts in Ohio. So this is what those 150 districts told us. 45% of them have no district plan for family engagement. All right. 16% have no staff person at their district level who has any responsibility for family engagement. And it's pretty rare to have someone who has even half time dedicated to that. less than 5% of the districts had someone who was half-time or more. Less than 5%. Okay, so not a lot of time. Let's talk about this. Let's take a look at this. When we asked them what percentage of families in your district do you think your district is currently successfully partnering with to support their child or their children's education? What we see, almost a quarter of those district leaders reported they are partnering with families of a quarter or less of their students. Only 3% of those 150 districts said that they were partnering with 75% or more. Keep going here. When we asked, how does your district evaluate the impact of your family engagement efforts? About a quarter of the districts report they're not evaluating, they're not. All right. Over half of the districts use event attendance. So they count number of heads of people who come in, surveys, or an informal feedback from families. So I heard this from a family, I heard that from a family, to evaluate the impact of their family engagement efforts. Second on the list is informal feedback. So these methods, what we know about that, just informal feedback, is that method, and or if it's the people who come into the building, we count them, that those methods tend to elevate the perspectives of families who have the means to attend an event. Maybe they have that flexible work schedule. They might have childcare. They might be, fluent in English, all those things that, require you to kind of get to school at a certain time, certain place, certain night. They might feel welcome in the school, so they'll show up at school, right? That's whose voices we tend to hear through these sorts of things. Only 30% do an annual survey, and only 19% measure the impact of what we would think would be the most important goal, and that's student outcomes. So some interesting things we're learning here. Are schools in your district required to develop a family engagement plan or a family engagement strategies within a larger school plan? So we're asking, are schools doing this? So in your district, do your schools have a plan? About a third of the districts that responded reported that their schools have a plan to engage families, which is interesting given that if you receive Title I funds, it's a requirement of receiving those federal dollars that we have a plan for engaging the families of all our students that's flexible and lots of other things there. But anyway, so we're just kind of taking stock of some data here. I wanted to share this with you because we're hearing from leaders about those elements that we would see in leadership here. So what do you think about the data I just shared? Let's use the chat here, if you would please, and share with me. What do you think about the data? Oops, not a strategic plan. Yeah, if you have a Title I funds, we're supposed to have a plan. Yeah, you're not surprised, Nancy. All right, here in Utah, I think we are very similar. Okay. All right. We most measure by participation. We do. I thought all family engagements have to have one. Right. Makes me think that there's more work to be done and missed opportunities. Yeah, we've definitely got some room to grow here. I'm in Ohio, so I'm sure that our data is included. You're a big concern. Thanks, Avis. All right, intentionally it's needed. I find that although a plan may exist, there's still a lack of real family engagement. That's true. Having a plan doesn't mean that we're going to have great practices. But we might be able to do more of those great practices and identify great practices if we have a plan. We're evaluating that plan. We have a vision and that policies that support that, right? If we have those leadership pieces, hopefully we can head in the right direction. All right, the data is not surprising where schools are the gatekeeper. All right, so I just share that with you to maybe give us some context, to give us maybe some motivation to say, we need this session. We need a family engagement leadership conference because we have some work to do. All right. So let's keep moving here. Thank you for everyone who's active in the chat. Please keep it up. So let's start talking about leadership here. We want to move to systems, not having isolated practices. We saw some lovely practices. Boy, I love that high school example of the English teacher who is families and parents and kiddos are joining together and reading together and exploring literature together. That's really interesting to me. It's a practice. And one teacher doing that is phenomenal. But how do I look at my system and say, hey, I want my high school kids all to have this support for engaging with their family and their learning? How do I do that? We know that studies suggest that strong, systematic, school-wide initiatives for connecting families and schools are important for students. What do we know? Whether or not we have a supportive system, district or school-wide, makes a difference. Studies suggest that strong, systematic school-wide initiatives lead to higher academic achievement, higher attendance, fewer behavioral problems, right? We see positive behavior. Good things happen. We know that. We don't debate that any longer. That's something we know from years and years of research. And also a sense of belonging. That is something I know we are striving for, because we know when students feel like belong in school, that being in school becomes important and motivating and inspiring to them. And we want to support that. We see that leadership, setting up and looking at our systems for supporting these good family engagement practices, for supporting these mindsets across our districts. It's like we want to build this beautiful sculpture. Here is the Statue of Liberty. I grew up seeing this. I grew up in New Jersey. I got to see this statue pretty often, and it's fabulous. It's creative. It's beautiful. Picture that as the amazing things that we want to do with families and our students, right? This family-centric engagement. But underneath every sculpture, there is this infrastructure. There are these things that make it strong that aren't very pretty, but they're what make it strong. They're what hold it together. And that is what the things I'm going to talk about here, the leadership components, the systems, collecting data, having a plan, having families and students have a voice in what we do. Those are the internal structures that we then create in our local schools and our communities that become those beautiful communities where families are and our school personnel are coming together in support of our students, right? That's what we're looking at, is we're building that infrastructure. So when we looked at Ohio in the years 21, 22, what we saw that schools with high quality programs, so we looked at different programs across. Schools that had high quality programs for supporting family school engagement. What they did is they conducted more advanced supports and programs for families. They did more things when they had systems in place. And they engaged with more and different families. So they were expanded to reaching more families. They had more support from their principal. They had leadership, more support there. They had more district support as well at both the elementary and secondary levels. And overall, that program quality, when I say program, I mean all the things that we're doing to really support family engagement in our schools, was not related at all to where they were located or the levels of poverty. So we're not going to point to say, yeah, but we have a lot of poverty. Didn't matter. They had leadership. They had put these structures in place. We saw more and reaching more families. That's what we saw. All right. So I'd like to talk with you now about these 8 essential elements that lead to meaningful change at an organizational level for family engagement. These 8 essential components: leadership, teamwork, having an annual plan, implementation of that plan and evaluating, measuring, having resources that we bring to bear, having collegial support, having networking. These are things that lead to meaningful change for family engagement. We want to see this movement from school-centric to family-centric. If we want to see us moving from talking down to families to walking alongside families, if we want to see us implementing really wonderful partnerships that build trust with families, what's the undergirding things? These are the undergirding things that I'd love for you to reflect on with me. Without leadership, we have confusion. A lack of leadership leaves our family engagement planning without a clear vision And therefore, we have different teams, different individuals, different stakeholders. We got parent groups and teachers, but they can be all moving in a different direction. We can have confusion. In Ohio, in our center and working with families and schools, working with our national partners like Debbie Pusher and the National Association for Family and Community Engagement and others, we have tried to really build a leadership ladder. What that looks like is we have our national partners, our international partners that we learn from, their expertise, their experience, their research, their best practices, national networks. We learn from that. That supports at our state level, at our team and our partners at the Department of Education, those of us who are thinking about all of Ohio together. We offer professional development, communities of practice, technical assistance, evaluation, tools, research, professional learning. We're bringing all of that so that at our regional levels in Ohio, we have folks who can coach our district leaders, who have tools to share with district leaders, who also can share professional learning to district leaders in their regions. And then we are supporting district leaders in their role as coaches for those school leaders, folks who are dedicating resources, who are setting policies, developing plans at their district level. Then that supports their school level, that supports principals in the leading of family engagement in their buildings, leading a team in their building, has a plan suited for that school, those families and that community, is putting that plan in place. Whoops, sorry, and I want to not leave out the parents, the students, and the staff who inform that. I put them at the top of the ladder because they are who we are lifting up. Who are we supporting? That's where our eyes are. That's when we keep our eyes on the prize. That's where we're looking. What we see with leadership, it's that transformational leadership that I'm sure you've talked about and learned about, and how we describe that is these principles. When we see that in a principal at that building level, they create this inclusive, supportive school climate for student voice, for family voice. They share their vision for strong school-family partnerships, and they share with the school community. They support and they encourage teachers to actively participate in this. They welcome and empower families to be genuine partners. And when we see a study from Young and Sheldon from 2020, that schools with principals who had promoted that collaboration, schools with that leadership, that really transformational leadership, that really focused on and supported those partnerships with families. They had teachers who were more active. More teachers were actively engaging with families. And the schools across the board had higher quality organization for partnerships with schools. And what this strong collaborative leadership was related to, that overall there was a stronger organization. That undergirding structure underneath that beautiful sculpture was then associated with the percent of teachers practicing engagement. So the more teachers that were engaged, the stronger that structure was. So leadership. So what are the strengths of the leadership ladder in your district? There's a little note catcher here. This is a question. I want to pause for a moment, and I'd like to hear your ideas. All right, so take a moment to jot them down. If you think about, in your context, what are the steps of that ladder? Where are you in that leadership ladder? What are the strengths of that leadership ladder where you are? I'll just pause for a moment. I'm going to be quiet and let you think. All right, now that I've given you a moment to think, would you share some of the thoughts that you're having? What are the strengths in the ladder of leadership in your system? Where do you fit? And what could be one step for improvement? You could pick any one of those things to share in the chat. Let's use the chat to hear from you. So Georgia, you're talking about siloed. Yeah, so it's not integrated. One step to talk to other schools and share knowledge. Yeah, that networking piece we're going to get to in a bit. Thanks for sharing that, Georgie. Gazelle, you have strong partnerships with departmental leaders and superintendent's office who are supporting our programming and initiative. That's great to hear that you have district leadership that's supportive there. Strengths, that parents are on the ladder. Absolutely. And Carla, our students too. I think our panel and hearing from students presenting today, we're hearing that students are so important to this. Having a dedicated family and community engagement office, you're good at giving staff voice, Natalie, providing opportunities for families to get involved, but still more of an involvement level than engagement level. But you're on that path. Wonderful. Ava, so strengths are best exhibited through a team approach, building in-school teams, wonderful. Teams at the center and working collectively as a collective with parents, community partners, wonderful. These are great strengths to acknowledge. We got to build on those, right? Absolutely acknowledge them where you fit and a step. You have a district leadership that wants to amend your district plan to research-based information, and you're charged with helping rewrite your district plan. And so there's your role. What an influential role that you have. I'm glad that you're here today, able to gather some thoughts that you can bring to bear on sort of helping to write that plan, that one plan for family engagement. Mark, thanks for sharing one step. You think district and school leaders need to see and experience firsthand how family involvement authentically and organically positively impacts a myriad of aspects of the school community, and it's not one other thing to do. That's a big mindset shift, Mark. Again, an important one to make. And I'm glad today has been helpful. Okay, I'm going to move us forward a little bit. Let's go. So let's think about teamwork. Without teamwork, we can have exhaustion, right? If you're trying to go this alone as one district leader, one teacher, one principal trying to do this on your own, your different teams within the school community, your different stakeholders, if they're not coordinated well, sometimes they can pull in opposite directions and you can really exhaust one another, right? Or duplicate things. Each person, each group feels like they can be carrying a load with no help. We get an amen from Keisha. Sounds like maybe you've experienced some of that. The exhaustion is real. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, let's name it. So maybe it's teamwork. Let's think about teamwork. So just back to that Ohio data I wanted to share with you. What % of Ohio districts requires schools to have a team that has parent members? Like a team that is working on school improvement planning, curriculum planning, some sort of level planning for the school that includes what %? Anybody want to make a guess? What do you think the data says? What %? 25, all right. 15, 20, 30. All right, well, look at this. That's pretty good news. We were coming in a lot lower than this. 46, no, I didn't go out and check, but 46% of them said we want parents to be on those buildings. Now, what's interesting, it's almost half, so that's great news. And when we think about it, our Title I federal funding that comes to our schools says families should be on the team. Also in Ohio, our Ohio improvement process, families are recommended members of building leadership teams. They're also recommended members of our positive behavior intervention and support teams that every school in Ohio has to have a PBIS team. We also know there's a lot of room to grow. So oftentimes we know also that the parent member is also a staff member who happens to have a child in the school, which is lovely. And they sit in this wonderful space of really thinking about school and family all at the same time. And there's a lot to learn there. But it also is not necessarily representative of the family's perspectives, the families that aren't so embedded and informed about the school. So team, what does that look like? We've been working with about 46 Ohio school districts to have school level teams in their schools and have those teams. And here's a picture of one from a school up in the Toledo area, and we sent them a banner just to celebrate with them. But here's some of the things that we see really make for those effective teams. So to avoid this confusion, and exhaustion, we want to see a team that represents the school and is inclusive, right? So as I look around the table, do we have people from the grade levels from this school? Do we have people from the different communities that come to our school? Does this team have the perspectives, those strengths, that parent knowledge? Do we have that here? We need that. That's a strong team. Is it safe to be in that team? Does this team create this safe space where I can say as a parent, I don't know those 5 acronyms you just used in that last sentence. Can we please, I don't get what we're saying here, right? Or I don't know if I can feel free to share my perspective here. And for our staff, sometimes it's our school staff members who are on a team who don't feel safe really sharing openly about what they see may be challenges. So that's an important part of what our teams need. We need leadership. We need someone who sets the agenda, who sets the dates, who invites people to come, who keeps things moving. Teams aren't effective without someone who it's on their to-do list to have that team up and running and functioning and moving forward. Need to meet regularly. It's not a sort of a one-time get-together kind of thing, but this is a viable, regular team that has this continuous improvement cycle of we do some things, we look what we're doing, we learn from it, we improve, and we do it again, right? This team that continues on and is not one and done, but continuously growing and learning and moving forward. And also one that's connected to the other initiatives, that's not siloed. Somebody brought that up, that things don't work very well when we silo them. And that's so important for us to acknowledge. And I want to maybe draw a picture for you. This is an activity that you might do in your school or in your district. We like to do this with schools that we work with. Say, okay, so in your district, in Ohio, we typically have a district leadership team. You have a building leadership team. You probably have a PBIS team. These are all things that we have in Ohio schools. You might also have a literacy team. You might also have some sort of parent organization. Maybe it's a booster organization, PTA or a PTO, right? We have these things, and they connect. We know that the building leadership team reports to district leadership team, and vice versa. There's this communication link. Sometimes the same people might sit in both teams. And also literacy and PBS, they're all connected to that building leadership team. Sometimes we don't know where that PTO sits. It can be isolated, right? It can sit off on its own side. What we say is we need a team that is focused on family engagement. In some schools, we already have a team. We're just going to repurpose them. We're going to bring families onto that team. We're going to make it our family engagement team. In some schools, it becomes its own team. So this looks differently in every school, how it gets constructed, but to have a team that is focused on leading family engagement, has parent representation, and then we need to know that this team is connected somehow. It needs to be connected to your PTO or PTA. It needs to be connected to our PBIS and building leadership teams. Those are important things. And Georgie, you're asking what PBIS is, positive behavior interventions and supports. If you Google that, what you're going to see is in every school in Ohio has a team focused on supporting positive student behavior. And then when students need extra support, they receive that extra support. And if they need really intensive support, they receive that as well. It's on a sort of a tiered approach. There you go. Thanks for asking. All right. So these are the sorts, I encourage you to do this in your own situation. Who is leading family engagement? Who's informing that? What does the team look like? Do we have representation from families and students? At the table. Here we're building this table together because we want a powerful table, right? We want who's at the table building this together with us. How does it connect? Who do they communicate with? We don't want to silo it. So I encourage you to do this activity with your teams, in your buildings, in your districts. So just reflect with me for a moment here. Let's stop again. This is another point where you may want to use that note catcher. Just think, I'm going to be quiet for a moment, and I want you to think about two things. I want you to think about who has a voice and should have a voice in the team. Who's at the table? And what are the connections that you already have, or what connections do you see are needed? Maybe you're starting from square one, and you're going to talk about what we want to do. The voices we want at the table, the connections we want to see. Maybe you've got something built already, but you need to strengthen some connections. So now I'm going to be quiet. I'll let you think for a moment, and then I'd like to hear from you. Let's share together. So who has voice? Georgie, you're sharing educators and leaders should have a voice. Parents and carers. I like that term, carers, and students. Yes. Keisha, who has a voice? The superintendent, building administrators. All right. Who should? Teachers, students, families. And existing connections, very few. This is big work. This is work that takes a commitment in one direction. So Keisha, keep on there. I want to encourage you to make one connection, to have this conversation with a few leaders, see what you can start moving in. What direction can you start going in? Mark, who should have a voice? Those that will be impacted. Absolutely. That's so foundational. Thank you for raising that up. And those who will have to implement. Absolutely. Thank you. Teachers and staff, parents, right? Sometimes we ask families had no say in what we're asking them to do. We ask staff to do things, but they've had no say. Who's going to do this? Who should have a say? Thank you for saying and pointing out, Sarah, our families of multilingual students, our students in our English learner programs, our families and our students who are receiving special education service, our students and families who are receiving those gifted program services. Absolutely. Who has a voice? We have, Cherie, you're sharing about the mayor, the chancellor, superintendents, principals who should. So, it's almost like your leadership ladder goes so far, and then we're not getting voice from the other levels, but we need to recognize that leadership, and I hope we raise that up today. Our students are leaders in this. Our families are leaders in this. Our carers are leaders in this, as well as our mayor and our chancellor. That ladder is not hierarchical. I probably should lay it out differently. But this ladder, every rung is important. Well, I've climbed some ladders before, and I know that any rung at any level breaks or is weak. And you shouldn't be on that ladder, right? We need strong layers at every level of any ladder. So this is our challenge here in creating those structures that are going to support family engagement district-wide, school-wide. It's to look at and say, what other connections can we build? What are the ways we can strengthen the different levels here? At the school level, we have a governing council, school board. There's a connection, but parents and students need to be there. Thank you. Avis, school parents and families are needed. Absolutely. For sharing that. Those are important voices for us to include. These are the steps we need to go. Cherie, you're in New York City. You're under the mayoral control. We have that in some of our towns in Ohio as well. You lead these voices. You've noted being louder and hear over the ones that we should have a voice. So idea of how do we create spaces, opportunities that are welcoming and safe for students, for families to be heard and to be recognized for the experts that they are, for the carers that they are, for the people who hold this knowledge and responsibility that they do that. I think Dr. Pusher really showed us in so many ways, whether it was a graph of time, whether it was the beautiful exhibits of knowledge that we saw, right? Families hold such knowledge and such expertise that we need to learn from. All right, let's go on to another way for us to think about this. If we don't have a plan, we can have a lot of false starts, right? We can set goals, we've got leadership, we've got a team, but we don't have a plan, right? So every time we show up at our team meeting, it's a new conversation, right? Because we're just talking about whatever. We're not on a path. We don't have a plan to move forward that's focused on goals. That plan needs to come to life. We have to put those promises, those mindsets, those vision that we have, those commitments that we have into action. And it's not surprising that in our survey, it indicated 45% of those districts did not have a plan. And only a third required schools to have a plan. And only 3% of them said they were partnering with 75% or more of their families. We don't have a plan. and we're not partnering with many families. So what I want to say, this sounds kind of dry, have a plan, have a team, right? But this, we cannot, I don't think, get to equitable, inclusive, accessible opportunities to build trust with families. We cannot reach all families. Our practices, it will continue to be hard for us to reach and work together with some families if we don't put these things into place. If we don't stand up and lead for this and put these structures into place, this is work, this is equity work. This is what this does, right? We can change mindsets, but if we don't have a leader and a plan and how to get there, it's hard to make gains. So school and district plans are, let me just talk about each of these. Number one, that plan is directed towards outcomes for students. We do a lot of work with schools and districts on our team, and oftentimes when we say, let's set the goal, they'll say, well, we want more families to do this. And I think, well, why do we want them to do that? We have an activity, and Hadley can put this into the chat. We call it the redesign. It's a redesign activity. Basically, it's take a plan that we have for something that we're doing. And one of the key things that we do when we examine what we're doing is we say, why are you doing it? What's the goal for students? What is going to change for students by you doing this thing, right? We need to know that what we're doing is directed at an outcome for our students. That it includes SMART goals, right? And it's not just we're going to count the number of heads that come into a building, because frankly, I'm going to look here. There's 81 of you here today, and that just makes my heart so happy. But at the same time, 81 of us being in the room together isn't going to do anything. We all have to learn. We have to change. We have to commit, right? We have to have goals, and we need to work towards those goals. We need to have goals. It's not just counting heads of families, but are we making a change? What's changing? We need to be preventative too. It can't be what we like to call the 911 school, right? We'll just fix things as problems arise. That's oftentimes our approach to working with families. When problems come up, we'll figure it out, right? That's not a way to work. We need to be preventative. We need to build those relationships of trust, those authentic ways of engaging with families. To be preventative. We don't want to be problem focused. Multi-tiered, right? We have our ways that we are engaging with all of our families, 80% of our families, right? But then there's some families who want different ways of engaging, who want deeper, more meaningful. They have different questions. They have different needs. We want to be able to have ways, various ways, not one size fits all, but various ways for families to engage with us, and that the ways that we offer for families to be in partnership with our schools. We want to be timely. We want to do enough to make a difference. You know, sometimes when I hear of a school saying, yes, we're engaging families around literacy, we do a literacy night in March every year. And I think, so some families come into your building for an hour and a half in March, and that's going to change literacy scores? Let's think about that. It's not enough. We need to do more. Co-design with those who will impact. Thank you. Someone already said that beautifully in the chat. Who's going to impact? They should have a say in the design of it. Otherwise, we're just guessing. And we also need to implement and measure what we do. All right. That's what plans need to include. That plan needs to come to life, because if we don't implement it, we just kind of get gradual change. We've got the snail on the screen right here. We put out our promises, but if we don't move on it, we're not going to have change at the rate we need to have change. Our kids don't have years for us to figure this out. We need to figure out now. We need to act now. We need to have a sense of urgency about this. It's already important. We know that. Now we need to get it done. So let's reflect if you will, together. Take a moment to reflect. If you had to think about how well planned is this family and community engagement in your school community, how well planned would you say it is? If you had to rate yourself, if you had to rate your school, if you are a carer here, a parent here, you're thinking about your school, if you're a student here with us, Man, you're saying a 6. And tell us more in the chat about that. Why did you say 6? We have an 8, a 7. Those are good things. I'm so excited when I see Troy. I see a 7. I see an 8. That's good. We are moving. That is like strength to strength. Let's keep moving from one strength to the next. Andrea, you're saying a 3. It's not a 0. We've got a 3. We've got a place to go. I think if a school has a plan to support positive behavior of students, if they have a plan to improve literacy, if they have a plan to improve attendance, graduation, we have plans around all of these things to bring how will we together with families support this for our students and with our students. There's this, we already have a plan. Let's bring our families into that plan. Let's bring them into partnership. Let's walk alongside them. Let's bring them into this together with us. Yes, we have plans that don't include families, but let's bring families into them. You would love to see a model plan. You know, Megan, we have some model plans and things available from our team on our website. We'd love to share them too. So if you all have plans that we could post as like examples to others, I hope that many of you will kind of dig into the resources that we have, that you'll follow up with our team after today and say, hey, I'm looking for resources in this certain, on this certain topic of this certain kind, and let us try to be a resource and join you in that. We would love to. All right, I see, Delilah, you're saying your school district would have one school and your schools would have another. It would be great to be on the same page. Yes. And then what a cool thing to sort of look at, to take some time to examine together and say, how do we build strength? You know, how do we build these together so that they're supportive of one another? And you're saying your district plan isn't detailed as much as it should be. Yours focuses on moving to the science of reading, moving to one campus, and attendance. All right, those are things. Yes, we see that so often in plans. Now your District 1 plan needs to be revised and submitted to the state. You have the opportunity to tweak it. I love that. To get families on the agenda to say, okay, these are all great things that we need to do. How are we going to walk alongside families in this? How are families? How is the power of working together with families, hearing from our students, going to help inform and strengthen that plan? And how do we build that into our plan? How do families walk alongside us in this move towards better instruction around literacy for our students? We've got to measure what we do. Sometimes we are planners, but then we did it. This is great. Woo, we're done. Let's go. I'll tell you, my team, we're all exhausted. We're going to be done with the day. We've got some snacks out here. We're going to sit down and debrief, but we're going to have to do a really thorough evaluation and look through all the feedback that you give us and what we've all experienced today so that we can do a better job for you next year. Without an evaluation, we don't know. Did we do what we said we were going to do? So remember from that survey that I shared for you, we learned that over a quarter of our districts report that they're not measuring the impact of family engagement, period. We don't measure it. And 19% measure the impact of student income. So that means 81% of our districts aren't measuring outcomes for students. We've got some room to grow. So evaluating, when you think about, if we think about evaluation, so leaders measure the quality and the impact of our family engagement. The information is useful at every level and it benefits the whole system here. So we want to share that. What do we want to share? Well, did we do what we said we were going to do? You know, so perhaps we plan something with families, right? Perhaps we form a family council that's, you know, meeting and helping to inform our school. We need to know, did it work? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? Did we do it very well? Did it have the impact that we intended it to have? How can we improve this? These are our constant questions, and whoever is impacted is the one to answer the question. That's why your feedback today is going to be so important to us. Data comes from families, it comes from students, it comes from our community, it comes from our school personnel. What data do you have? What data do you wish you had? Here's some examples. As you think about this, as you're thinking about your own notes, what data do you have? So families who don't respond to a letter about services for multilingual students, that's data. They didn't respond. What's that tell us about our method of communication? Student surveys that show maybe 40% of our students have a strong sense of belonging at school. That means 58% don't. That's data for us. We want to work together with our families. How can we help our students belong at school? If we have a staff survey that indicates that our teachers have low levels of trust in families, they have low levels of trust in our students, they're wonderful tools to measure levels of trust. We should use those. That's data for us that will help us design how we will partner with families. If we have staff speaking at a staff meeting about not having time to connect with families, that's data. If we have administrator records about topics that families keep calling from and asking about, maybe an administrator who has weekly times where families can come and meet them in their office, that's data. Without resources to support these plans, we have frustration. Here we're talking about financial and human resources. We need both to make our plan work. But when I say resources, what comes to mind for you in the chat when I say resources? What are you thinking about? Georgie, I like your point of what the data doesn't say. Oftentimes we have to look in the gaps. What does our data not tell us? What do we need to know? Resources, okay, thank you, Cherie. Funding, it means staff. It means staff. It means community. What knowledge we have of our family, that's a resource. Access to school, that's a resource. These are really wonderful ways. Money, Catherine, often money and time. Okay. So here's some thoughts I have that I'd love to share with you. One is attention. Getting family engagement on the agenda. Building awareness about it at all levels of that leadership ladder, on school boards, on councils, at our regions, at the state level, in our teacher staff meetings. Is family engagement on the agenda? Getting it on the agenda, that's a resource. It's attention. People are thinking about it, paying attention to it. Certainly time. We know that time is a limited resource. Structuring time for teachers and other staff to meet and build relationships with families, to have the time to, as Dr. Peshore shared an example of a phys ed teacher a social studies teacher who took the time to shoot out those emails to families regularly, right? That's time. You needed time to do that. It's a resource. Personnel, certainly that was something that we noticed in our survey. We asked, does anyone have any amount of their percentage of time, responsibilities, it says this is for working together with families, carving that out. Leaders can do that. Principals in a building can do that. District leaders can do that. As family members, we can carve out time in our precious time that we have to engage with schools, right? We have this time. We have people. We have students. Do we give our students time? Do we set aside time for students to inform this? And also opportunities to learn. We see that as a real resource. Learning from our lessons, taking that lessons learned from our evaluation of what we've done, taking days like today. We know that for many of you, you took valuable time today. You took it away from something else and you gave it to that. You dedicated resources to family and community partnerships. We think that collegial support is important. If we have an unhealthy culture, you can have a vision with leadership, but without the support of those on the ground, you're not going to have a group of people who are on board. That can spoil even the best plans. That collegial support is so important. You know, we try to build that in through just some simple things, a simple way to do that. We say to leaders and to coaches, to lean into one another, to teachers who are on the same grade level team, for teachers who may be on the same, we're together on the English team at our high school, we're in the mathematics team at our high school, or I'm on the second grade team in my elementary school. To spend time saying together, what are you doing with families? Is it working? Just to have that. You can do it on your hand. Is it working? How do you know? What do you know? What's telling you that? What's not working? Right? So maybe someone is being courageous. They're making phone calls home. They're reaching out to a family that doesn't seem to be responsive. They're reaching out to a family perhaps who seems unhappy, but they're reaching out nonetheless. That takes courage. What's working? How do you know what's not working? How do you know? What are your next steps? What are our next steps together? How can I support you? Maybe you can use those 5 things and implement those on a team that you're on, right? These 5 things, ways of having that support with one another. We at our team we develop communities of practice. You can join a community of practice that we have that's virtual called the Family Engagement Leaders of Ohio. I'll share that with you in a moment. But basically, we want to bring people like you, like us together to be supportive of one another. And we also need networking because otherwise we can feel isolated. And that's why we're so happy for today, because some people you're the only person in your district or in your school or in your PTO, you're the only person who really is thinking about this, and you want to talk to other people. And we don't want you to be isolated because that can really lead to you feeling cut off from learning and from growing together. And we don't want you to feel cut off. We want you to feel connected. Right? So we want to think about this. I hope you'll reflect on this. How are you networking? We can help with that and others as well. Who are you learning from? Who are you teaching about this? And how are you celebrating? We want to celebrate this because we truly believe there is joy in this work. There's power in this work that we're doing, and it's worthy of celebration. I just want to give you a moment here to quickly reflect with me. We're getting close to our end time, but I hope you'll just stay here with me. What best represents the experience that you're having in your school community when you think about family engagement and the whole organization, the leadership for this? Are you experiencing meaningful change? Is there confusion? Is there some anxiety, some worry? People are afraid of this. We're getting started, but we're start and stop. We've got some gradual change. We don't really know. We're doing a lot of stuff, but I don't know if it's sticking. I don't know if it's making a difference. Is it frustrating for you? Do you feel like you have a toxic culture, isolation? Maybe you can identify that. I hear gradual, meaningful change. Angelique, I am excited for you for that. Wonderful. What are you experiencing? If you can identify that, spend some time reflecting on what does it feel like to you and your colleagues. And then going back to this sort of elements of leadership, these 8 essential elements, and going back and saying, perhaps we need to dig in to one particular area. Maybe not all 8 at once, but let's identify a place for us to start. Sarah, false starts, gradual change. Jen, gradual change. All right. So digging into those steps that you can take that we've talked about today, that you can take to start moving things forward. So we don't have isolated, wonderful things happening. I know that there are families who care deeply about education who want to partner with your schools. I know that there are people in your schools, there are all of you who really want to see these partnerships grow. We want to hear from our students. We need these undergirding things so that it will be more equitable, more expansive, more accessible to all families. We need to build these elements. We need leaders like you. Avis, you're saying gradual, meaningful change. Great. We see Cecilia, you're saying, no? Shalicia, thank you. You're seeing false starts. I hope I'm saying your beautiful name correctly. At school community, gradual change. At the district, some anxiety. I think, a new superintendent, I think recognizing the fear and anxiety, let's name it. And let's talk about how we can move past that so we start having some early wins, some good experiences that we can build on. You know, Hadley led a session on building our efficacy, our sense that I can build, that I can be a partner with families. She has a wonderful tool for measuring that, helping us really identify that and move forward, really naming any fear or anxiety that we have. All right, I want to move forward here. I am so grateful for you, and I hope that there are 2 or 3 nuggets, 2 or 3 takeaways, things that you, actions that you will take. I hope that you will note them down. Don't let this day pass without taking note of the actions that you can take, and share it with us today, here today. You go ahead and share it with us in the chat. I hope you'll share it with a colleague as well. Hadley, welcome. Join our conversation here. We would love to hear from you in the chat, actions that you're going to take. And while you're doing that, we do have an ongoing community of practice that's virtual called our Family Engagement Leaders of Ohio. We have lots of people who aren't from Ohio in that group. But we gave it that name and it's kind of fun. So we hope that you'll join it. It's ongoing. It's a community of practice. It's a place and a space for you to continue to connect with people who are here today and others. Georgie, you've said care deeply, challenge directly, be open to feedback. Yeah, I love that. That feedback is data, right? It's a way for us to improve. Gazelle, I hear you saying utilize the provided resources and knowledge. I'm glad that you have appreciated this training. Thank you for that. I hope that there's some bits and pieces that you can take to strengthen the leadership and the systems of support wherever you are. Angelique, I'm glad you were presented by the student panel. Were like the stars of the day. I hope that you can have student panels. We hope that we modeled something today that you can do in your school, that you can do at the district level. Georgie, talking to your principal, talk to the directors. Okay, I am going to be quiet now and let Hadley take over and give us some final words. Thank you all for being here this afternoon.
Well, first, I just want to share the link to Barbara's article in case you want to read more. And also, I want to thank you for spending your day at the Ohio Family Engagement Leadership Summit with us. And thank you to Dr. Barbara Boone for sharing your expertise with us this afternoon. You always inspire me. And while we hope that you who have attended today can take some knowledge from today and apply it to your work tomorrow, we know that the learning doesn't stop here. So be sure to be on the lookout for emails from the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center for follow-up opportunities to this summit. To ensure that we've met your needs and follow up appropriately, please take our survey. I'll put that link in the chat one more time. There we are. And thank you again for attending today, and please stay connected. Remember that that survey is also what we use to make sure that we get you your contact hours if you are looking for those. So again, please fill out the survey. Today is our last session, or this is our last session for the day. And thank you so much for coming.